to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Working on a team where you can go into work every single day and absolutely love what you're doing. Why? Because you're specifically aligned to that work that you're doing, but you also have this team around you that has accountability, it has trust, and it has fun all built into it. And that is how we define a dream team. So welcome to Talent Optimization Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about what does it look like to create that dream team in your organization? What specifically are the benefits to the employees of being on a dream team? And what does it look like for the organization to actually create those dream teams along with the benefits to both parties? So here's the deal. What is a dream team? And a dream team is that team that is synergistic. They are meeting every single one of their key objectives and they're having fun doing it, right? And really, when we look at that and say, what is our business strategy? And then what are the business results that we're driving to? What our dream teams do is our dream teams are a part of this people strategy that we create inside of our organizations. And to create a great dream team, you have to start with strategy. And this is backed by the science and the research at Harvard. And there's several articles out there from Harvard Business Review, Forbes, et cetera, that are all lining to this strategic plan. What is your business strategy? How does that lead to those business results? And then we can start to align individuals specifically with the organization and that specific team. So there's a couple successful strategies that we use to build that dream team. And one is to commit to that strategic plan. What is the strategy for that? And here's why that's so important to your employees. If they know where they're going and there's clarity around that, they're able to jump on that bus, get in the right seat, and be able to produce at a high level, right? There's nothing worse than going and putting everything you have into a project and then being told, actually, you just worked on the wrong project, right? I don't know if any of you have ever had that happen, or you get a directive from a supervisor that says, hey, we really need this by 2 hours from now, or we need this by next week, Tuesday, and it's a huge project, and you bust your butt to get that thing done. And then the follow-up, you're like, hey, did you look at that? Any feedback on that? And the response from the supervisor or manager is, actually, we changed directions, or we haven't even looked at it yet. And you're like, so those are times where when we're not specifically tied to here's the strategy, here's the outcomes we're looking for, and our management and leadership team is incredibly clear on that strategy, along with us as that team as to what those outcomes need to be, our employees start to get disengaged. What that means is the work that happens after that may not always be at that highest level that they did that first time, right? So for employees, creating a dream team and having really clear, concise strategies in place and the communication follow-up on that shows that, hey, they're going to get that feedback loop that they need. And they are also going to ensure that they're working on the right things that are meaningful. And now let's flip to the employer side. So as you're listening into this, either as HR or as executives inside your organizations, this is something that you want those outcomes with the least cost possible. And that's one way to do it. We have the strategy and we're only working on the things that are important. We're going to be able to get there much faster. So that first item is we need to have a strategy to create peace is communicating clearly. And here's the thing, when we communicate, only 95% of employees, according to a Harvard study, do not understand or are aware of a company's strategy. So we just talked a lot about what that strategy specifically is. And here's the deal, every single employee in your organization needs to understand what that strategy is. And here's some quick tips for how do we ensure that we're communicating our strategy effectively. And tip number one is we need to ensure that our strategic plan is clear and that it's communicated effectively across the organization, meaning it's not sitting on somebody's shelf, right? It's on the internet. We're talking about it during our orientation, onboarding a new staff. We're talking about it when we're kicking off a new team. So it's really, we're building that into the fabric of the organization. The second piece is we're building it into every single job description. So when we're creating job descriptions, I actually build this right into kind of that summary. So organization XYZ is committed to whatever that mission is, and we're executing that mission through these 3 strategic objectives that specifically align to this role, right? So we've got it in the summary, but then we also have it built specifically into the essential functions of the position. And when we look at those essential functions, we're writing those as SMARTY goals, right? So a SMARTY goal is specific, it's measurable, it's actionable, it's realistic, it's time-based, and it has that why factor, meaning it's tying back to the mission of the organization. Why are we doing this? And when we can tie every single specific essential duty to that, we're making a really clear delineation of here's what's important and here's how we're measuring those outcomes. And so the next step that we have, so the first one was that we've got our strategic plan communicated. The second one is it's in our job description. The third one is that we're bringing it up in every single team meeting. So, hey, what are our current strategic priorities? Where are we at on those? So that it's in front of us every single time. Because when things aren't in front of us, what gets measured gets results, right? So we want to make sure that if these are our strategic priorities, then we need to ensure that they are aligned to the performance plans. So when we're doing our one-on-one check-ins with our staff, when we're doing our performance management process and programs throughout the year, we need to make sure that, those strategic priorities are directly tied to that performance of the individual and of the team. So when we look at our performance management plans and that program, do you have a team portion of this and specifically an employee portion? Because if we have individuals only being individual contributors and not collaborating, it's not going to create a dream team, right? We have all of this competitiveness happening. So we need to make sure that we have those 2 components built in, but it's specifically tied back to that strategy. And then it is specifically looking at celebrating our results, right? So we've got the strategy in place. We have the specific outcomes. We need to make sure we celebrate that with our staff. So often what we see when we step into organizations, and we sometimes, kind of fall into this as well, is we get going and we hit these goals, but we're not celebrating them. And then it's like the next time around, you feel like you're in a grind versus going, oh my gosh, we actually hit that thing and we hit it in time. And we need to make sure that we're celebrating that because that is going to build our team to step into that next thing. So those are some key items specifically around how we're communicating those key items from that strategic plan. And again, when we're creating dream teams, so much of this is about clarity of what are the outcomes we're going for. When we look at alignment is the right person for the right job, right? So we like to look at this as 2 sides of the same coin, right? So one side of the coin is the individual person. The other side of the coin is the job. What does the job need and what does the person need? Again, 2 sides of the same coin mean that those things are aligned. If those aren't aligned, we're going to have issues before we even get there, right? And if we have individuals that are in a wrong role, they're probably not going to be a great contributor on the team because they're going to be working so much harder to get that specific job done. So that alignment is key. But when we know what the strategy is and what we're executing towards, it's much easier to align the person with that specific job. And then the next thing that we're specifically looking at is we are then looking at balancing our team types. So let me just kind of repeat what our steps are, just kind of to say this again. So one, we have to know what our strategic plan is, commit to that plan. So our leadership team knows what it is. We're all moving in the same direction. The second thing is we need to communicate that plan effectively to all levels within the organization. The third is we need to align the individuals to the specific jobs that they're in. And then the fourth is we're balancing our team types. So what do we mean by balancing our team types? When we're balancing our team types, we're essentially stating that this specific team needs to execute on a key strategy. Well, if we have individuals on a team that maybe aren't specifically aligned with that to execute that effectively, it's going to be really difficult for that team to do that. So we use an easy button here, and that easy button that we use is called predictive index. And within predictive index, we can really see, hey, where does every behavioral styles are? And there's really four kind of key areas that we look at. The first one is teamwork and employee experience. So when we're looking at teamwork and employee experience, these individuals are focused on collaboration and relationship building. They prefer to support others to grow and develop, and they make decisions collaboratively, seeking input from each other involved in the team, right? So these are really our collaborators. These are the individuals that are going to, kind of check in and say, how are you doing today? Are you doing okay? Do you have everything you need? And then the next one that we have, these are our process and precision folks. And these are the individuals that are going to be well organized and efficient. They're going to communicate concisely after thorough reflection on their own. So these are independent thinkers, but yet when you assign them a task, they're really going to go through and make sure all of the processes are in place to get this thing implemented. Again, they make decisions collaboratively, and they resolve conflict by focusing on the task involved. Then we have our results and discipline folks. And the distinction here is these individuals focus on they're making decisions individually versus collaboratively as a group, right? But yet they're still incredibly detail-oriented. They're driven and competitive, and they prefer to focus on tasks and execution, and they make decisions independently without waiting for that consensus. And then the fourth area that we specifically look at is our innovation and agility. And when we're looking at innovation and agility, we're specifically looking at, these are our dreamers, right? These are our visionaries. These are typically the individuals that are saying, hey, we're going to try something new and see what happens. So they're open to risk and experimentation. They prefer to act quickly and assertively. They make decisions independently without waiting for consensus. So these folks are saying, hey, here's where we're going. We're off 10,000 miles an hour, and they get it 80% of the way down, then they leave it, right? But they also can see ahead of, hey, where do we need to go? And here's the thing, every single one of these individuals and the folks in these areas have amazing strengths. When we put them together, we need to make sure they're aligned with what the team strategy is. And so that's essentially how we're creating our dream teams, right? We're not only aligning individuals to the job, but we're also aligning the team to what the team needs to produce. And there's a couple of different types of team types that we look at. So I'm going to give you kind of two examples. One might be an executing team. And on an executing team, this is specifically a team that is no nonsense. They address conflict logically. Everything is facts, not feelings. So if you think about an executing team, if they're addressing things very, very specifically, there's a huge potential for burnout. We may need that executing team to get this project done, but we also could really bring on a balancer to that team that might be a teamwork and an employee experience individual that can then ensure that, hey, they're checking in. How are things going? How are things going at home? I noticed that XYZ was happening. That helps to balance that team. Now, if we look at another kind of team type, so another team type that we could specifically look at may be a pathfinding team. So a pathfinding team is one that's really looking to get into new markets. They're relentless. Conflict is frequent. It's also valued as people challenge each other to think differently. And team members don't always coordinate before acting. So if we, for the strategy we need to execute, need an executing team, but yet we have a pathfinding team, we're going to have a really hard time getting that thing done. And that's going to create conflict, which means we're probably not going to have that dream team that we actually wanted. So that just gives you kind of a quick idea of what this looks like. Now, here's some of those key takeaways. Why are creating dream teams important for our staff? One, because they're going to be more engaged in the work that they're doing. So they're going from this have to curve, like, hey, I have to be here, to this want to curve, which says, I want to do this thing to the absolute best of my ability. And when we flip this on the other side, specifically for our managers and leaders in our organization, you're just going to get better results. So let me give you an example. I was working in an organization on a brand new team in a brand new position, and I was responsible for all of our human relations, which included fundraising, it included human resources and marketing. So what we were responsible for doing is twofold, right? One part of what we were doing was very compliance focused, and we needed that really detail-oriented individual in there. But then we also really needed to go out and create strong relationships to do $1 million asks, to bring in that foundational dollars for the organization. So we had to almost break territory and create new programs in order to do that. And so that team looked a little bit different, almost like an adapting team. Hey, sometimes we had to act one way and other times we had to act another. The key here was everything was about relationships. And as we worked, what we found was that we really had to have those strong relationships built on trust. And how we then communicated with each individual on that team became incredibly important for all of us getting those key pieces done. So with that, as we close every podcast, 2 key takeaways. The first one is for our executives listening in today, and that's as you create your dream teams, ensure that your strategic priorities are incredibly clear and communicated effectively across your organization. So not just the strategic priorities, but what is the outcome that you're specifically looking for so that your managers and your team can really execute towards that. And then the key takeaway for HR listeners today is, make sure you're creating that people strategy that aligns that business strategy to those business results. And when you're looking at that, ensure that that communication is there amongst all levels of the organization of here's the highest priorities and how we can get there. At the same time, those dream teams are really built upon trust and knowing that here's the strategy that we need to execute. Here's who we need on the team to make that thing happen so everyone's strengths are amplified. So if you're curious about more, you can find us at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast. And in the show notes, we do have a link that if you want to learn what your team type is, there's an easy way that we can do that, and we would love to have further conversation with you. So we wish you a great day, and thank you so much for listening to Talent Optimization.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.